And good day, everybody. Welcome to MissInformed Texas. I am the Yuck Monkey Mike Youngin with Red Zone Mortgage Group. I am not misinformed. Unfortunately, MissInformed is unable to make it today, so you will be blessed with my beard, unfortunately for y'all, and our lovely guest who will take the majority of the attention today, rightfully so, Miss Sonja Ryan. Sonja Ryan, representing the Carly Ryan Foundation. Today's episode, we are going to be talking about online child safety and what we can do to protect your children, our children, in this ever-evolving big tech world it's changing every minute. And the laws that are out there in place, the laws that are not out there in place, what they're lacking, what you can do, do's and don'ts, and just a really mature subject matter today. And to lighten the mood just a little bit, first, shout outs to Missy. We hope you're doing well with your little, speaking about kids, I have the same. Missy's not here today because her child is currently suffering from, what do you say, that bowel movements?
Oh no.
Oh no. Yeah. And mine's been suffering from that since Monday. It's just like,
Don't come too close to me.
Oh no, I think I'm good. Well, you should be good, right?
Hopefully.
But diarrhea, vomiting, it's just, it's not good. Lovely accent. I never noticed you had an accent before. What?
A little bit of an Aussie accent.
Oh, Aussie.
I guess.
Yes, Miss Sonja Ryan. So let's go to, let's jump right into it. So January 31st, we had a big Senate Judiciary hearing with the likes of the CEOs of big tech. We had, if I'm not mistaken, Mark Zuckerberg, and I don't know the rest.
The CEOs from TikTok, Discord, Snap, X, formerly Twitter, and they all came before a Senate hearing to answer essentially to their failings in relation to protecting kids on their platforms. And so essentially they got grilled for about 6 hours or so. And interestingly, the only CEO that willingly came to the hearing was Mark Zuckerberg from Meta. The others had to be
subpoenaed. Yeah,
and US Marshals paid them a visit. So it was interesting that the others didn't voluntarily attend. So, it was a big day. It was really powerful.
And you were standing right, so if she looks familiar, Sonja was directly behind those big wigs for big tech. And when the famous scene of Mark Zuckerberg turning around and apologizing occurred, he was looking basically directly at you and everyone in the front row. Mm-hmm. And why were you there?
I was standing there with other parents that had lost their children to online harms in various different ways, from bullying, being able to purchase drugs on online social media platforms, online predatory contact, child sexual exploitation, sextortion. So we were all standing together, holding photographs of our children that we have lost. And it was really powerful. It was a really powerful moment. The energy in the room, the feeling in the room was palpable. It was really, really amazing. And the senators stated afterwards that it was one of the most incredible hearings that they'd been a part of. And they were just all so supportive of us all. And all of us really felt quite held in the space. But it was a really incredible experience, especially originally coming from Australia, to be able to now, forward Carly's legacy here in the United States and represent her and other victims of crime, at a global level, because we know that crimes against children online are borderless.
Right.
The man that groomed my daughter and murdered her tried to meet with 2 girls here in the United States first. Then he tried to meet with a girl in Singapore, and then eventually coerced Carly into meeting with him alone and took her life from her. And that's a really heavy thing to discuss, but I think it's really important for listeners to understand, the gravity of what's happening to our children in this online space. And it's a tough thing to talk about, but it's an important thing to share, so that then we can go on today to discuss about the ways in which people that are with us today can implement tools and strategies so that their kids can have a positive experience online and they can be protected from these harms. Because, we have criminals offline and they've migrated to the online space and they hide behind, privacy. And they often falsify their identity and details online in order to groom and harm children. And
that's what happened
that's
with
the
Carly.
world we live in, yeah. That's what happened with Carly, yeah. She was groomed by a man who posed as a teenage boy, and he spent over 12 months trying to infiltrate our lives, posing as this young boy. His persona was talking to not only Carly but all of her friends. And so he spent a lot of time trying to really fit in with their way of life and have things in common and look for gaps in their lives and create conversation that meant something to them in relation to music, the things that they were into. He spoke like a teenager. He even used...
How old was he?
He was 50, and he used his own son to be the voice of the persona that he created and the image and the boy on video. So it was really a father and son duo who manipulated her, groomed her, essentially having her feel as though she was cared for and loved. And this is what criminals do. They look for a gap in a child's life. They look for potentially a vulnerability. Our children are looking for validation online. They're looking for connection. And they know how to manipulate conversation. They're very clever at coercing kids into doing things that they would never normally do. And so, they eventually coerced Carly into meeting with them alone, and they brutally murdered her. And, of course, my whole world fell apart. I was left in that real groundless grief. But the gift in the sorrow was an enormous amount of clarity. And I really thought about what Carly would want me to do. And that was, for goodness sakes, Mum, do something. Make sure that what happened to me doesn't happen to another innocent child in the future. And so that really, propelled me forward to think, okay, where do we start here? We're just in the midst of Facebook becoming pretty big. Kids are getting online a lot.
Did it take you to get out of the trenches, to pull up the bootstraps?
It was about 4 years. And one of the lessons I learnt in that grief was it was really important to face it, to feel it, and not, be taken down the road of alcohol and drugs and whatever else was offered to me. And it was offered to me, right. And thankfully I sort of had, again, that clarity to know. I just kind of knew if I took the drugs that were being offered to me from doctors, from others, if I went down the road of drinking, I just kind of knew I'd lose connection to myself and I'd also lose connection to my daughter. And so thankfully I had that clarity and I was able to really, sit in that grief and sit in that sorrow and kind of just felt it. And, I think what that gives you, the gift in that, is an enormous amount of strength. If you're able to sit with that pain and transform it into a way forward, find some kind of purpose or find some kind of meaning in amongst all of that, then I think when you do come out the other end of it, oh boy, there's no stopping you. It gives you such an enormous amount of strength. And so for me, that was the gift in the sorrow. That was the gift in the trauma.
You're like a real life superhero. I mean,
well, I don't know about that. I'm a mama who loves her daughter more than anything. She was my world. And I just, again, keep on coming back to what would she want me to do in reality?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and if the situation was reversed, what would I want for her? And so, you know, this really is about, I guess, finding a way to honour her, but also finding a way to make sure that this crime doesn't happen to another child. She suffered terribly, and you know, I never want any parent to have to go and identify their child or have to go through that, or for goodness sakes, any child having to go through this. And here in the United States, we have over 30 million reports of online child exploitation in 1 year to the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children. You sit with that number for a minute, and it's increasing every year. So this is a real pandemic in itself.
Right.
We're at a public safety crisis at the moment, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here in the United States. I've done a lot in Australia, of course, going back to moving through that grief. When I had to wait until the trial was finished and Gary Newman was sentenced to life imprisonment for murdering my daughter, it wasn't until that happened that I was able to actually go and incorporate the Sonja Ryan Foundation and then actively try and do something to create change. So we went ahead and looked at implementing adequate education, online safety education, and rolled that out across Australia. Then I helped to advise on the legislation to open the Australian Office of the E-Safety Commissioner. I supported funding and pushed for funding for the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation. And then from there, I thought about what had happened to Carly and how Gary Newman had falsified his details to her and faked his age and identity. And I thought to myself, well, how is this possible? We have laws for fraud, right, in life. You know, what's the penalty for committing fraud here in the United States? Pretty tough, right? Well, how is it possible for grown people, for adults, to lie about their identity and age in order to groom, manipulate and harm children online? So we come up with the idea of Carly's Law, and we introduced it into the Australian Criminal Code in 2017. It passed as federal law.
10 years.
Yeah, it passed as federal law, and essentially Carly's Law makes it illegal to prepare to harm a minor online, and that includes misrepresenting age and identity.
Okay.
So it's almost like preventative legislation rather than reactive legislation. So it gives police the opportunity to go in and rescue a child or intercept before that predator is able to meet with the child and essentially stop that meeting from happening. So we're wanting to prevent that trauma from happening.
And that's what the U.S. is lacking currently.
Yes, so there's lots of robust laws here. There's some great child protection laws. But what we want to do here is bring Carly's Law across here to the United States. We either go federal, which I'm trying to do at the moment, or state by state, and essentially either introduce elements of Carly's Law into current child protection legislation or introduce it as a whole. To make it illegal for people to misrepresent their age and identity to children online in order to groom them, manipulate them, meet with them to harm them, essentially.
And for lack of better words, to the audience, if you're familiar with the Amber Alert, you can make a correlation between the Amber Alert and what we're trying to implement, what Sonja's trying to implement with Carly's Law. Is that correct?
Yeah, so when it passed in Australia as federal legislation, I was approached by the United Nations, and they asked if I would be willing to try and get Carly's Law into the criminal codes of as many countries as possible. And so, you know, when COVID hit and we were all in lockdown and particularly in Australia, our borders were closed, I went to the Attorney General and said, please let me out of the country. You know, I need to keep on, you know, pushing Carly's legacy forward, and I really want to introduce Carly's legacy to the United States. And so I was fortunate enough to be the opening keynote speaker at the Crimes Against Children conference in Dallas, which is one of the biggest child protection conferences in the world, actually.
Really? When was
with
that?
over 6,000 attendees. That was in 22.
Okay.
And so that was a really amazing experience, and that really introduced Carly to this country. And, you know, people may be wondering, well, she's an Aussie, what's she doing in America doing this? But, you know, I always knew that Carly's legacy would go beyond Australian shores. I've worked so hard for the last decade to change the online safety landscape in Australia, but, you know, as I said earlier, this is a borderless crime. You know, there are kids being groomed, harmed, trafficked, you know, being coerced into providing explicit sexual material to criminals online all over the world. There are predators offending against Australian kids, you know, Australian predators.
And then there's new apps being developed as well.
Yeah, new apps being developed constantly, ways for kids to be able to connect privately. Now we have end-to-end encryption, which basically makes it impossible for law enforcement to be able to, you know, gather the evidence they need for prosecuting online child predators. So we're really up against it.
So when you informed our group of what you were doing and you sent out the link, I was, you know, enthralled with watching as much as I could that day of the Senate hearing. And there was something that kept on getting brought up with a particular section that is prohibiting the big tech companies from being prosecuted. Is that correct? Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so essentially at the moment they're protected. So, you know, instead of regulating social media companies before we went into this age of being ultra connected, they have been protected from being prosecuted for harms that happen on their platforms. And so what we're saying is that it's time for social media companies to be regulated. We feel that it's the only way forward to have government regulation. And so there's a number of bills at the moment that we're looking to try and get passed here. And I've got a couple of them here for anyone who's interested, because, you know, you can go to your local member and you can, you know, bring these bills up and actively do something to try and get some
and we're going to post these after the show as well.
Yeah, to try and push them essentially. So we've got the EARNA Act, the Stop CSAM Act, the SHIELD Act, the Project Safe Childhood Act, and the Report Act. And essentially, this will make social media, a lot of the elements within these bills will make social media companies accountable, you know, for what they allow on their platforms. Now, of course, these platforms were never intended to be utilised in this way. It's not like, you know, Snapchat made their app, you know, for harm to happen to children. But the reality is that criminals have migrated into these spaces. So wherever children are, you will find criminals on those platforms trying to take advantage of them in some way. So, you know, people often say to me, well, which app is the worst app? Well, no, they're all, wherever there are kids, they're all potentially, you know, accessible to people looking to harm.
So watching the Senate hearing, I have my, based off of everyone's answer, I have my opinion, but in your opinion, which app is the safest app, or which app brings the most attention to the parents of what their controls are? None. Okay.
No. So, you know, they're all pretty much the same. And, you know, their focus, unfortunately, is profit and privacy. You know, their focus is not potentially, you know, their child safety teams. In fact, Meta dissolved a lot of their child safety teams and, you know, pushed forward end-to-end encryption, which is a real problem. It gives criminals another layer of privacy in order to, you know, groom, manipulate, harm children. So,
for those unfamiliar with end-to-end encryption, what does that mean?
It means that essentially it makes an app completely private, end-to-end. So, you know, essentially nobody can access the conversations, the information.
Police.
Including police. So at the moment, police can, you know, if they're going through an investigation, they need to gather evidence, they'll go to that tech company and they will request those chat feeds, or they'll request information about that particular user, in which that information is easily gathered and given to law enforcement to be able to prepare for prosecution. With end-to-end encryption, law enforcement cannot access it. It's just not available.
So they don't have anything to build a case off of.
They don't have anything, no. And so what it does is it enables another element of privacy for criminals online that are looking to sexually exploit children.
And so this has been just an ever-evolving problem.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, and so for me, enough is enough. And it's, I think as a community, we want our kids to be able to go online and connect and have fun and use it for what it was intended to be used for, right? There's lots of great things about some social media platforms and being so connected in this day and age. We can find opportunity, we can find, we can keep in touch with our friends that are overseas, our family. There's some really great elements. But unfortunately, we have to adapt to the changes in criminal activity as well and the crime trends. And, we have to be prepared for those. And I think that's the problem that we're at the moment is, the internet was created, off we went, kind of the horse bolted. There were no protections put in place. There was no online safety education for parents. There was no support for parents. Kids just got on these, awesome devices and got connected to the world around them.
AOL chat was my first memory.
Yeah, and so, off we went.
Right.
And there were, companies were not regulated. There were no safety mechanisms implemented within those applications. And so criminals just went, oh, hey, look at this. We've got an anonymous medium.
You basically gave them dessert and dinner all at once.
We can basically get on there and pretend to be a 10-year-old girl and go and sexually exploit these bunch of young boys or, vice versa, go and exploit young girls easily. And now with apps, when Carly was groomed, it was over 12 months on chat, on Facebook.
Were you aware of her talking to what you perceived to be as another minor?
Yeah. So what I want to say before I lose track of that was just that she was groomed over an amount of time. Well, now within the apps that we have with the chat functionalities and everything, we're seeing kids being groomed within minutes. Within 10 minutes, a predator will coerce a child into providing a sexually explicit image. And once they have that image, then they will then threaten that child for more content. And they will say things like, if you don't send me a gift card or money or more images, then I'm going to put your photograph all over the internet. I'm going to share it with your parents, your friends. And so we're dealing with sextortion.
How long does it take for anyone that is aware of what's going on, for them to report that incident to that image or images being taken down, if at all?
Well, in Australia, we're lucky that we have the Office of the E-Safety Commissioner because they exist under legislation that enables them to get takedowns on behalf of a user. So, say, for instance, a user will report to the platform, report to E-Safety, and then E-Safety will contact the social media company directly. There is harmful material up about has content of a child. It needs to be removed, and if they don't remove it within 48 hours, they're fined daily. Okay. Now, you guys don't have that here, and so it'd be really wonderful if there could be something similar to an E-Safety Commissioner here.
Right.
Having some of the tools that have worked really well in Australia to see if they could potentially work here. And that goes across from legislation to education material to best practice education framework, whole range of things that I've done there that have worked really well along with other government departments and other entities to be able to potentially benefit US citizens and children here. Because what we want to do globally is reduce this crime type and make it, have serious, consequences for anyone who chooses to get online and groom, manipulate, harm a child in any way. And as you brought up before about Carly, yes, I was aware that she was talking to this young guy. And of course, our computer was in our kitchen, and I would see this teenage boy who was Gary Newman's son, Stephen Newman, on the video chat. And so he was talking to not only Carly, but he was talking to her best friend, he was talking to her group of friends. And so he used his son to be his voice, I guess, and used his son to manipulate Carly. And so there's many different tactics predators will use, but the most common is pretending to be a person the same age. So a kid feels comfortable, they feel, like they can talk to that person.
The level of crazy that you were dealing with is just another step above, because he was grooming his child to be a groomer.
Yep.
He
was 17 years old, his son. So he was operating over 200 fake profiles online.
And so his son, Stephen, what's the ramifications? What's happening to his son? How long is his son in jail for?
Well, unfortunately, his son was acquitted of Carly's murder, even though he admitted that he helped his father to murder Carly. In a full admission. The admission couldn't be used in the trial because he wasn't legally represented at the time of his admission, which was a failing by law enforcement, unfortunately. So the son was acquitted, but he went back to Victoria, Australia, and he offended against 13 girls under the age of 16 and received 35 months in prison.
35?
And is out, has a Facebook page. It's and that's something that I can do nothing about. So what I have to do is
Stephen
is focus on what I can do to protect children. I just have to stay, I guess, focused on what I can do now, because if I think too much about that, or I think too much about Carly's suffering, it just immobilises you. It's just too difficult to sit in for too long.
Understood. Well, so the Senate hearing, that occurred on the 31st, which also has significance because that was
Carly's birthday.
Carly's birthday.
Yeah, the timing of it was crazy. I miss her every single day. And as each year goes by without her, it doesn't get easier. And for those listeners that have lost people they love, they know exactly what I'm talking about. But I'm living proof that love exists beyond death. And I tell you, that kind of love is so powerful. If you're able to connect to that love, then really I think anything is possible. It's just really uncanny that it was her birthday on the same day as the Senate hearing. And not only that when I had landed in DC, our Australian Federal Attorney General, Mark Dreyfus, flew in on the same day. And so I was able to meet with him. We were able to have a chat. He was able to take, information about the Senate hearing and information about Carly's law and me being there to his meetings with your Attorney General, Merrick Garland, and others in Homeland Security. And that was just really amazing timing. It was great to be able to connect with him. And so the embassy in DC, the Australian Embassy in DC, supports me in my meetings here in the United States. But now it looks like I'm staying because, I found myself the love of my life while being in America, which was completely
off-camera
unexpected.
shout out to Nathan Taylor.
Yeah, that's completely unexpected in between going back and forth from the United States to Australia for meetings and everything else. Well, I happened to meet Nate and, very, very fortunate that, we connected and fell in love and now we just went and got married, and so
congratulations.
Thank you.
That's amazing. Your travels.
Look at this giant ring he got me. Isn't it
I don't think there's a camera big enough for that. I'm sorry. Can we get 2 of those on there, please?
Yeah,
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it?
Congratulations. Yeah, you'll have fun paying that off.
Yeah.
But
so I feel very fortunate. So in amongst all of the heavy work and everything, there's been some real joy for me here in America, which has been a real change. In Australia, I'm so well known. Everywhere I go, there's lots of media, there's lots of engagement in Australia. I work heavily with the federal and state governments. So coming over to the States where nobody really knows who I am, it was kind of, I think what I needed after a decade of working so hard, and then to meet Nate was just such a blessing, really.
Just the same way I feel about him.
Do you? And then, of course, I get to meet you through Nate, and then all of his great friends like Luke and Marcus, and Aria and a whole range of other amazing people, and I just felt really pulled in and loved by everybody, which I really appreciate in amongst all of what I'm trying to achieve here in America. So thank you, Mike.
Well, I mean, you are one of the most amazing people I have ever met. I mean, your journey, your story, your soul, your character. I mean, you just wear everything out on your sleeve.
Oh,
And it's
thank you.
the first day I met you, I was lucky enough to meet you on my birthday, and that was in itself an experience that I'll never forget. Now your journey is you know, it's brought you to all sorts of places. It's brought you to Dallas, of course. You, if I'm not mistaken, and I think you can speak about it, but you met the Dalai Lama, perhaps.
Yeah, I spent 10 weeks with the Dalai Lama in France in a temple in the mountains. So when I very first lost Carly and I was in that incredible trauma and grief, and it's not just the trauma of losing your child, but it's a trauma of all the process, the coroners and, you know, the investigation and finding out what they did to Carly. It was just trauma after trauma after trauma. And so thankfully I was invited by the Dalai Lama's team to a luncheon for people benefiting the community. And when they heard of my story and obviously saw how broken I was, invited me to this temple in France for 10 weeks. And it's the best thing I ever did, because what it did is it forced me to feel that pain, to sit with that grief, to try and come to terms of looking at a future without her in it, which was, I couldn't even get my head around that. Right? You've got a daughter, you know the love now.
Yeah.
And, you know, so to be sitting in that space with no distraction, no televisions, no, you know, just sitting in nature was just invaluable. And they helped me to transform my suffering into a way of being able to benefit others. And to be really, I guess, to know that everything we need already exists within, that we just have to connect to that. And to be able to connect to that is to be still and to be quiet and to meditate and to just be in the moment. You know, life is so fast-paced. We're either attached to our past or we're grasping at our future, trying to, you know, figure out what we're doing next. Not very often do we just stop and just be here now in this moment and just, you know, be very present. And that was a really important lesson I learned. And it's some of the information that I do share with parents now. Even in our online safety education programs is connection, communication with their kids, you know, sitting with self, you know, a whole range of other things. So that was really invaluable. That was amazing. And I've been all over the world. I went to Abu Dhabi and opened a conference there for the royal family. I've been to London. I've been to New Zealand. I've been everywhere, all over the place. And of course that stalled briefly when COVID hit.
And then we roped you in.
Well, I just had to ask permission to leave Australian shores, and because of course our borders were closed. So I was really fortunate to be able to come across and then could continue having meetings here. And as I said, the focus areas are really to see if we can get Carly's Law enacted at a federal level, but you know, if we have to go state to state, we'll go state by state. We've got interest from Florida, we've got interest from Washington State, Minnesota.
How's Texas treating you?
Texas, yes.
Okay.
But I've got to meet with the governor again and pick up a couple of bills that we had in progress here, and then they got stalled and, of course, held up in the legislative process. And so we need to get back and revisit those.
Do those
things.
have like particular names or?
It's House Bill 3110 and House Bill 3111.
Okay, House Bill 3.
And so, you know, we need to pick up conversations around that again. So the focus areas are really to, you know, enact Carly's Law, elements of Carly's Law within legislation here, to push our Project Connect education program here in the United States. There's a lot of focus on child sex trafficking, but not as much on online safety education. And we have best practice frameworks and things already set up, so I'm hoping to be able to benefit US citizens with that information. And then we have a community impact statement in which we include in the judiciary process, along with a victim impact statement, so that judges pre-sentencing can understand that this affects the victim, of course, mostly, this crime type, but what about the community? What about law enforcement that are having to investigate these horrific crimes and view this horrific material? You know, what about their well-being and welfare and how it affects them? How does it affect families, the community as a whole? So wanting judges to take that into consideration, you know, when they're preparing to sentence
Yeah, I mean,
a
that's
criminal.
affecting so many people that never even thought about that aspect of it.
So there's a whole range of things that I've brought here to the United States, and really for me, children everywhere are important to me. You know, this is not just Australian focused. You know, yes, I'm
Right.
from Australia, Carly, we were born in Australia, but this is a global crisis, and children everywhere around the globe need to be protected. They need to be loved, they need to be lifted up, they need to be able to use the internet as it was intended to be used.
Well, before, you know, so obviously these bills are cooking. What can parents do now? What can they do to be as involved or be as in control or just be knowledgeable of what their children are doing online and on their apps?
First and foremost would be communicate. You know, communication is key. You know, sit down with your kids and just say to them, hey, you know, if anything happens online that makes you feel uncomfortable or unsafe, please come to me and talk to me about it. And if I don't know what to do, then we'll go to someone who can help us, like the Carly Ryan Foundation, like the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children, Thorn. You know, there's a whole range of support services here in the United States. And, you know...
You said that was Thorn?
Thorn.
Okay.
And so, you know, the other thing that you can do too is before you give your child access to the internet, go to our website at carlyryanfoundation.com. So that's C-A-R-L-Y, Ryan, R-Y-A-N, foundation.com. And go to our resources page and download our online safety contract. And essentially what that is guidelines for kids to follow. Parent signs it, child signs it, and essentially it's just making sure that they're not only looking after their own safety while they're online, but they're also looking after the information and safety of their family. So it essentially, you know, creates a guideline, just like we have a driver's license in life, right? You know, we have to follow road rules. We you know, we can't speed. We can't. There's a whole range of things that we can't do on the roads, and if we do, there is a consequence for that, right? So the idea of the online safety contract is here's access to the internet and here is your device that I'm paying for.
Right.
And along with that privilege comes responsibility. And so I highly recommend that parents implement that contract while you're paying for the connection to the internet and the device. And when your child is financially independent, then of course they're more skilled in their life experience, they have more knowledge, maybe a little more resilience, and then they're able to manage their online interactions a little better. But, you know, we've got to remember that our kids don't have life experience.
Right.
So they can't really navigate very well, and they believe people. You know, when people tell them things online, they believe it. And they're looking for opportunity, they're looking for connection, they're looking for something of their own. And so it makes them a perfect, I guess, target to be, you know, manipulated in some way, whether that's financial, you know, extortion, whether that's people looking for child sexual exploitation material, you know, whatever that may be. So, you know, we really need to empower our kids, educate them, and talk to them about what they're doing online regularly. And when when kids get, I guess, you know, defensive, parents remind your kids why you are asking, and that is, I love you, I want you to have a really great experience online, I want you to be safe, and this is why I'm asking. It's my duty as your parent to ask these things. It's my job to keep you safe when you're navigating the world, and that's offline and online. So just remind kids of that, and I think that really helps them to understand why parents need to ask. It's not about being nosy, it's about, hey, I'm providing you this service, I'm paying for it, you know, we need to have constant discussion around the use. And also parents, make sure that you understand the apps that your kids are using. So look at the apps on their phones, their devices, and understand the functionality. That's a big one. You know, so what is Instagram? You know, what are the features? What's the private chat functionality? What are the privacy settings? You know, so that if you understand how an application works, then you can sit down with your child and say, hey, is your Insta on private?
Yeah, there's no excuse. If you're a boomer and you don't know how to use a phone and your kid is scrolling Instagram and Snapchat, you better learn, because...
Yeah, and you've got to remember that app connects your child to the world.
No offense to boomers.
You know, it's just, it connects them to the world around them, and that's the good and the bad, you know. So we need to be prepared for that. That'd be my top tips.
Is there dialogue that can happen with, you know, so the busy parent, the parent that's working 2 jobs, is there a dialogue that could make it easier for that parent to relay this importance to the child caregivers or the daycares or...
Absolutely. I mean, they can contact Carly Ryan Foundation. So it's just info@carlyryanfoundation.com, and we can share that at the end of the segment. And we can assist you to do that. But honestly, the online safety contract that's already available on our website has all the dialogue in it. You know, so if that's given, you know, also to carers, and we also have a teacher's toolkit for schools. We have a range of resources.
Okay.
So we also have app fact sheets, which parents can connect to, and it'll let parents know, you know, okay, what is the app? How does it work? You know, what's that functionality? And then how to report if something does go wrong on that platform. So, you know, I'm just really hoping to be able to, you know, I guess expand Carly's legacy here, you know, connect with US citizens here, and try and prevent this crime type from happening to other innocent kids here.
What can we do to help promote, support Carly's legacy, like today? Who can we reach out to? How can we get more support? How can we get these laws enacted? Because, I mean, right now it's the wild, wild west for our children online.
You know, right now it would be contact us through our website, carlyryanfoundation.com. If there's any kind of support that you can give to the foundation, we are a registered 501c3 here, so we're tax exempt if anyone would like to make a donation. If anyone would like to get behind sponsoring Carly's Law to try and get it enacted here in the United States. The other legislation that we're looking at trying to get pushed through that I talked on earlier, contact Senator Durbin's office, Senator Graham's office, you know, contact your local representative, talk to them about Carly's Law. You know, we can email you the information to take into your local representative's office, have them, you know, push and campaign for this. You know, like I said before, we are at a global crisis when it comes to online offences against children. You know, last year it was over 30 million reports to the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children. Goodness knows what it is now. You know, and sextortion has gone through the roof. And, you know, it's you know, we need to come together as a community. We need parents to come together and talk about this. You know, we need kids to understand that they are navigating a space that's fun. Yeah, sure, it's great. But there's also dangers that come along with that privilege of being given the internet, access to the internet. And so they need to be mindful of that, and they need to be spoken to about, you know, what could potentially happen online and what to do if it does. You know, so parents can also have those conversations where they give their child the answer. So what are you going to do if this or this or this unfolds online? What would you do? And have their child answer. And their child will remember that. They'll remember that conversation. And when they're with their friends having a sleepover or doing something and somebody does approach them in an inappropriate manner, they'll remember what their parents or their carer said to them, you know. So it's just, for me, it's, you know, around constant communication.
Rip the Band-Aid off, dialogue.
Yeah, and talk about this. Is a tricky, confronting subject. But, you know, we have to face this in order to gain change. You know, we have to talk about this horrible subject of online child sexual abuse. I wish we didn't.
Right.
You know, I really wish we didn't.
But there's nobody better than you.
And, you know...
to bring this to the forefront.
You know, I lost my own daughter, you know, and there's no bringing her back. And I don't want that to happen to anyone else, you know, to have to face having to go through that and navigate that. And, you know, Carly was bright, she was artistic, she was funny. You know, she had such a bright future ahead of her, and he took that from her. And, you know, there's so many other children, I mean, millions of children around the globe exploited, harmed, murdered. She's not the only one, and this is what we're trying to change,
Absolutely.
And so together we really need community. We can't do this alone. We need parents to go to their local school and say, hey, what are we doing when it comes to online safety? What education have you got coming into school to help educate my child and others about what it means to be safe online and the dangers to look out for? Ask, go to your parent groups. What are the teacher groups called here in the United States?
I'm not at that level yet.
Not at that level yet.
I got a little 1-year-old.
But do what you can to get this conversation starting, and feel free to share our website with friends, family.
Well, you had mentioned support, and what I can pledge, shameless sponsoring, but we have to address, the sponsors of this show are going to be happy and will be pledging support. So that's Super Home Warranty. Super Home Warranty, everybody. Unfortunately, MissInformed could not be here today, but she is the best, easy, breezy rep for Super Home Warranty. Super Home Warranty, we are going to be backing the Carly Ryan Foundation. Red Zone Mortgage Group, you practically work with us right now. I mean, we're so intertwined. But Red Zone Mortgage Group, we're going to be definitely pledging to the Carly Ryan Foundation and the Joey Bertrand Risk Agency. I know that there's going to be some stuff cooking up from there. So we will be pushing out your message. We will be broadcasting Carly's legacy. We will be at your wedding. We were at your wedding. I don't know how you want to say
that. well, we kind of just, did a quick little get together at the courthouse. But yes, we're having a proper ceremony. But,
Okay.
We wanted to get that going so that, I can be an Aussie Texan sooner rather than later.
And
or a Texan Aussie.
And we can't forget your lovely son, Bailey.
Yeah, my son Bailey, Carly's brother. He's a sweetheart. We got him over here recently to visit, and he really loved it.
What a stud! What a stud! I mean, I'm talking about it's just like a short-haired version of Thor with tattoos.
Oh goodness! Yeah, he's a sweetheart. I love him to death, and it was just wonderful to have him over here. And but going back to what we were speaking about, I just really ask all viewers to have a look at our website, get informed, talk to your family, talk to your kids. Have this conversation about them being online and who they're connecting with and the kind of information they're sharing. And,
take control of the wheel. Get involved.
Yeah, get involved.
Don't be hands off.
Don't just let them be in their room on their phones, especially late at night. Overnight, Nope. It's where people are searching for kids that are alone in their rooms. And all it takes is a few flattering comments and a little bit of validation for that child, and they've got that hook, and then they can start, exploiting that child, and that's how quickly and easily it happens. And it happens to every demographic, every child, no matter how educated, no matter how, no matter where they're from, it's happening to every child here in the United States at an unbelievable level, and all over the world. So, you can play your part. And also too, I'd love to ask anyone listening if you would all, be my daughter's advocates too. She needs voices beyond mine. And, it's the power of the people, right?
Yes.
And, what we can do is really incredible. And, I'm living proof that love exists beyond death.
Yes, you are.
And Carly's legacy is the pure power of love in action.
Well, let's run with this. The Carly Ryan Foundation, thank you, Sonja, for every bit of information you've given. We're going to give some links out after the show in the comments. MissInformed, we hope everything gets a little bit better at the home front. And thank everybody for watching today. MJ, Mike Youngin with Red Zone Mortgage Group, the Yuck Monkey, filling in for MissInformed Radio. And we are signing out from Studio USA.